Hey everybody, it's Alex here from VG247.com, and I've got a little bit more gameplay footage here of Humankind for you. Now, we previewed this on the channel a while ago. Since then, obviously, the game's made a lot of development progress. It's also been delayed once. It's now due out later on in this year. Originally, it was going to be out by now. And this is Sega's, well, the first time it was ever introduced to me, it was described to me as Sega's Civilization killer. And it's coming from Amplitude Studios, who have, of course, made some really beloved strategy games, the Endless Legend games and the various other games around that. And this is a game from them that is a bit more, like I say, it's like Civilization. It's like Sid Meier's series that Firaxis makes. With that said, it does do things in its own unique way. It's definitely got a unique flavour. I think when you look at a screenshot, when you look at it just for a second, you're like, oh yeah, that's Civilization, obviously. But then when you get a little bit deeper into it, you realise how different Humankind is and how different its focus is. And I actually got to play it again, hands-on, for, I don't know how long it was, maybe 3-4 hours, maybe a little bit longer. And yeah, it's a newer build than the previous time I played it, of course, with a lot more in it, and it becomes clear now just how complex and in-depth this game is. That's the thing really I want to get across to you from the very word go with this preview, really, is that Humankind is enormous and detailed and very, very brutally complex. You know, it doesn't hold anything back. And yet, they talk about it as... They said in an interview with me that they want to kill the micromanagement, which sounds a bit harsh, but what they mean by that is they just want to try and bring this game to a point where it's really accessible for anyone, but you scratch beneath the surface and there is incredible depth. So a good example is combat, which we sort of talked about before. Amplitude has always, in all their games that are 4X style, offered a more complex combat than the average. And yeah, I mean, Humankind is no exception. Once you get into battle, the perspective sort of opens up, so what is one hexagon in the game becomes several more in the battlefield, and you actually do have to worry far more about flanking and all that sort of stuff than you would in a game like Civ. Another really good example that's new for this build that I played is diplomacy. So diplomacy in this game is actually tabbed. You've got like a relations tab, a trade tab, a treaties tab, and a crisis tab. And so obviously these deal with all the basic elements that you'll be dealing with when you are going into diplomacy. And you can sort of propose stuff, you can threaten to try and get what you want, you can demand to try and get what you want, you can bribe, you can submit a counter proposal when you get a proposal saying, yes, we'll do this, but we want X amount of gold, and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, it's really interesting how there's so many systems here, but it's been built in a way that's really, really clever and carefully done to not seem overwhelming at first. So it's like with diplomacy, the first diplomatic options you get are very, very simple. But as you progress through the eras and progress through time, you get access to far more options diplomatically. And that's when you get to the point where you have treaties piled on top of treaties and all that sort of stuff. One of the touchstones they've mentioned in some of the pre-release material for this game is how the world wars didn't start instantly through one declaration of war. They were a series of events, treaties leading to countries joining the war, countries falling like dominoes into this enormous conflict, and they wanted to create a diplomatic system that would have that sort of nuance to it if you wanted it, and I think it's looking like they're going to be pretty successful. In fact, the whole game from this hands-on feels a little bit more people-driven than Civilization, which I guess fits with the title, right, of Humankind. It's more about the people and their sort of accomplishments than it is about this monolithic idea of a civilization. And this is even reflected in your leader, which you don't pick a famous leader, a character that they've designed at Amplitude at the development studio. You actually have an avatar creator. And so you create an avatar who looks however you want them to look, and then they will sort of change their appearance subtly as you go through the game's eras. So you're designing their face and their hair and stuff like that, but then what they wear is going to be determined by where you're at in time, but also what civilizations you choose as you go along the way. to recap that system, basically, instead of picking a civilization and going with it all the way through the game, in Humankind you're basically growing by choosing elements of real-world civilizations in each era. So in the ancient era you'll have some choices, and then, you know, classical, medieval, modern, all these sorts of times are represented in game, and each one there are a bunch of different civilizations you can choose from. So the idea is, over time you're actually combining the elements of all your choices. So it's like if very early on in the game you choose the Egyptians, and then a bit later you choose the English, how does the Egyptian culture and the English culture interact to create a unique civilization that will be distinctly yours in your run of Humankind, or in that run of Humankind? And I think that's really interesting, and it sort of, again, it meshes with this idea of just trying to make a more open-ended system than you would strictly get in other games of this kind. And I do think it's really, really working. These are difficult games to talk about in preview, because the problem is, I've put hundreds of hours into every Civilization game, into some of the past Amplitude games as well, but you don't really begin to hit your stride until you actually played through it multiple times and have an idea of how the systems work, because any amount of tutorialization in the world is not going to truly prepare you for the nuance in systems like diplomacy and religion in these games. The only thing that can truly prepare you is to play them again and again and again and again. And so a limited hands-on is of limited use. But I can definitely say that what I'm seeing here, I'm really impressed by the size and scope of it. Because when I did the previous hands-on, I was like, okay, they've got this civilization gimmick where you pick civilizations as you go, but in every other way, I was sort of expecting it to be like other games in the genre. But I've come back to this hands-on and just found that every system, be that religion, be that diplomacy, war, it all sort of has a similar level of ambition and a similar desire to truly differentiate itself from the rest of the genre, specifically Civilization, to be honest. That is really, really exciting, because Civ has pretty much dominated this genre for a very long time. Anyway, yeah, I'm really looking forward to Humankind. I'm not going to keep you too long. I just wanted to show a little bit of gameplay footage from my hands-on and just show what the game is shaping up like, show that it's improving and getting better and it's neat and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, we'll be back closer to release in the autumn, because I really do want to dive deep into this game and present to you the late game and all that sort of stuff, but we're not quite there yet. So it's still alive, it's still going on, it still looks great. There's a written preview on VG247.com if you want to have a read. But for now, let's just leave it as suffice to say, I'm very, very excited for this, and I'm very surprised by both the level of depth and how beginner-friendly it appears to be so far. But there's still a bit of work to do there in development, and they've said they're still working on that sort of stuff, balancing, tweaking, changing things. But I think they're definitely on the right path, and it's great to finally have a game that can stand up to Civ. So that's it from me for now. Until next time, everyone. See ya.